name is Andrea Michalek, and I am the co-founder and president of Plum Analytics. And today what we're going to be talking about is our approach to Altmetrics. So a little bit about Plum. We founded the company in January of 2012. I did this with my co-founder, Mike Bushman, who is a librarian in his background, and we met one another while working together at ProQuest, building the Summon Discovery service. So I headed up technology, and Mike headed up product. And together, we came up with the idea for this new way of measuring scholarly impact. So we started the company in 2012 and very quickly got our first customer, which is the University of Pittsburgh, who's been with us all along and an absolutely phenomenal development partner as we went from what was really a concept of how we could pull together this new data to talk about scholarly impact in a new way to where it is now, where it's a fully robust product suite that many people are using in their own universities and their own institutions. Funders are using it, et cetera. So January 2012, we founded the company. 2013, we launched the actual PlumX product, which is what I'm going to be diving into demo in bits and pieces a little bit throughout this webinar. And last year, we had customers expand, like I said, for universities, corporations, and publishers. And then January of this year was when we became an EBSCO company, which is great news for us. And we've really been able to grow phenomenally in just the 6 months since the acquisition has occurred. Our customer base is also expanding, so it now includes funders as well, grant makers, people funding research. And with all of this happening, we're really set up great to continue to grow as Altmetrics, which kind of began as a hashtag, even if you think of it that way, became a new way of measuring more comprehensive research impact. So the big idea here was the opportunity to redefine how scholarship is measured. So if you think of traditional scholarly measures, they all really hinge on measuring citation count. So how much has one scholarly article cited another scholarly article? And these citation counts are what are at the core of journal impact factor, so giving kind of one score to an entire journal. And love or hate these metrics, I'm sure I could, if you were off of mute and I asked how many people love the impact factor, maybe the one person from Thompson on the phone would raise their hand. But there's a couple problems when it comes to measuring impact. The first and foremost is the scholarly citations, they lag. So from the time work that's published today can be measured using these traditional citation, Web of Science or Scopus cited by counts, it's going to take 3 to 5 years for other people to read the work, do their research, and then go to publish, go through the peer-reviewed cycle, get out there, and now we can count the very first citation. So to get to critical mass, there's that 3 to 5 year time window. So if you're looking for saying, hey, I did good work last week or last month or last year, you're kind of stuck saying, well, look how great the journal that I published is, because that's the only thing that's there, and this impact factor is a measure of that. But there's kind of the 80-20 rule that there's most of the highly cited papers in a particular journal come from 20% of the paper. So if you're really looking at measuring the impact of the paper that was just published, it's not going to help you. So the place where PlumX really comes in is being able to answer this question of what impact has our research had in the past 18 months. So how do we do that, or how do we think about even doing that? And the way we're able to is the fact that researchers have moved online. They produce output that they distribute online, and people interact with that output online as well. And this isn't new news, right? This is something, a macro trend that's been happening. And what that produces is what we call data exhaust. So there's all these different sources of how is this research output being interacted with. And we like to joke that we almost go from A to Z. As soon as we get Zotero in there, we will. But looking at this list, which is just a sampling actually of all the different sources that we pull data from in PlumX, you can think of books pulling book reviews from Amazon, data sets from Dryad or Figshare, how much have they been shared and used, slide presentations that people give on SlideShare, videos on YouTube, all of these non-traditional types of research output, as well as the traditional, journal articles, being able to get data about their use and how much have these things been shared in social media, how many times have they been downloaded and interacted with. All of these different sources come together to give us big data. When we first started back in 2012, we pulled in all the data we could get from everywhere just to see what, for the very first time really, what could you tell about a particular article or a particular, what we call artifacts, since they're more than just articles. So what are all the metrics we can gather about these artifacts? And without some sort of categorization, it quickly just becomes lots and lots and lots of data, which you can't do much with lots and lots of data. So we developed 5 categories of how to represent this data exhaust. The first is usage. So usage, although most people don't think of it as Altmetrics, usage is very important, knowing how many times has a particular article or artifact been downloaded, viewed, played if it's a video. All of these different core usage metrics we pull together. One of the other usage metrics we have for books, which are harder to quantify, is how many libraries hold the book. So that's another form of usage. It's a proxy for how much is a book being used. The next category of metrics are what we call captures. So this is where someone has gone beyond just viewing the artifact, and instead they're saving it for later. They're bookmarking it. They're marking it as a favorite. They're putting it in Mendeley as a reader. If it's source code, they're forking the source code. If it's some sort of way that they're indicating, I want to come back to this. And research behind Altmetrics is new, but one of the things that is being shown in several studies now is that captures are a really good indicator of future citations. And of course that makes sense, right? Because if you are a researcher who is looking at what was interesting to them, they will use whatever the reference management software is to save that for later. And then when they go to actually write their paper, where are they going to go back to? They're going to go back to wherever they've stored it as. So it's not shocking that these are great leading indicators of what may become highly cited seminal work later. But what's new is actually pulling this data together and giving it to folks to see. The next category of metrics are mentions. So now someone is engaging with the work even more. They're writing a blog post about it. They're commenting on it, writing a review. They're writing a Wikipedia article and adding it as a link in the Wikipedia article. So they've linked to the book, say, or the article itself. Social media, for many people, they think of Altmetrics and they think it is kind of synonymous with social media. How we think of social media is we group it all together, right? So we group together those likes, +1, shares, tweets, all in one category. And I can find as many studies that say tweets predict citations as I can find tweets do not predict citations. And the reality is tweets and social media in general is a great way of measuring how well certain work is being promoted. So if you're promoting your work well, you're going to have good social media accounts. And it's a really great way if people are focusing on trying to promote their research more to have that data at their hands, at their fingertips. And of course, citations, they don't go away. Citations are a part of the overall impact assessment and impact story, so they are important to continue to consider. So our approach to Altmetrics is really to handle all 5 of these categories with the, captures, mentions, and social media, what people traditionally think of as Altmetrics. We like to joke that we look at all metrics rather than just Altmetrics in the products that we build and the services we provide. So one way that this is different, and especially when we very first started talking about what we're doing about capturing data about the usage of articles, is people said, oh yes, that's like Counter. I know Counter stats, and it isn't like Counter at all. So Counter starts and can tell you how much your institution uses a particular collection, right? They're journal-based metrics that say, okay, this is how much I've used this. What article-level metrics in PlumX can do is tell you the opposite direction. How much does the world use what our researchers have produced? So it's really a new vantage point and changing the area that, the way you look at metrics. The fact that these metrics are timely and some are near real time, they give us this feedback loop. So similar to the speed limit sign that just tells you, hey, this is how fast you should be going, versus the speed limit sign with your actual speed next to it that lets you see where you're going. That changes, hopefully, the people who put these signs out there say, hey, we hope this changes behavior. We hope when we see that you're over the speed limit, you're going to slow down. It may just cause you to benchmark how fast you're really going, which is, how well does my speedometer tell me how I'm going versus what the sign says. But it causes you, when you see these signs, typically to take some sort of action when you see those metrics. On the other side of the screen here is a report from Fitbit. Fitbit is the little wristband that you wear around your wrist that counts the number of steps you take. And this was sent to me. This particular report was sent to me by one of the guys on the Plum team, and he was saying this is a great example of a wonderful feedback loop metrics report. And what's kind of fun is he then told the story behind the report. So the data's there, but there's also stories embedded here. So if you look at the total number of steps that he's taken and compare that with this person on the right, which happens to be his wife, he of course said, oh yeah, you can see that my wife is doing far better than I am. I need to really catch up. The other kind of hidden story in the data was, I think he was actually trying to tell me what was down here, right? His average sleep duration was less than 2 hours a night. So hey, and I'm working really hard. So these metrics, the feedback loop, can give you data and tell the stories behind what's happening in a way that it would be very difficult otherwise. One of the exciting aspects of this, and part of what got us very excited early days, was this knowledge that once these metrics become available, once people and authors are seeing these metrics, they're going to want and demand more of them. So early pioneers of providing open metrics are open access publications, right? This is a great way of showing the value of, if you deposit in the IR and the institutional repository gives you metrics, that's a great way to get data back and have it come full circle. Publishing in open access journals in general have open data as well, so that kind of cements yet another good reason of being able to see what is occurring there from the author's point of view, the people making the decision of where to publish and how to share their work. What we do with all of this data is not just compile it at a particular article level, but we build this into dashboards. Our focus has always been to serve the needs of institutions to better tell the story of the work that their researchers are producing. So University of Pittsburgh, here's an example of here is what their homepage inside of PlumX looks like. It has 3 main sections at the top of the page. The first is this artifact summary. Then there's the researchers. Each researcher that they've profiled has their own dashboard. And then you're also able to look at it in different groupings. So they publish journals, so we can look at metrics journal by journal of the work that they've published. We can drill in by school or program or by their different research centers. And this hierarchy is completely customizable per site, per customer, so that if you're looking at things very different ways, you don't need to look at it in this hierarchy. And I'll show you an example a little bit later of a very different way of building dashboards. So how this works, oops, let's see here, let's see if we can, there we go. So each of those 5 categories is up in the blue box in the top. So across the 16,000 or so articles that we're tracking, artifacts we're tracking for Pitt, we can see all of the different usage stats, the top 5 places that we're getting captures from them, the different citation counts, one of which is the number of times patents cite other patents, all the different social media accounts, being able to see each of those main groupings and mentions. So Wikipedia, Amazon, Reddit, SlideShare, all the different places that their work was mentioned. So being able to narrow into a particular school and program here, we're in their arts and sciences, and we can then, at any of these levels in their dashboard, be able to see what the particular artifacts are and drill into those and see now these article level metrics, both all of the different counts per category as well as metadata and ways to link out to that article. If you go in and look at a particular researcher profile, here you have the same basic layout, right, with the different ways to navigate in the different categories. You can sort and filter the data, and you can drill in, and there's some visualizations and reporting that you can get to here as well. But this is basically how our dashboards fit together, that it's all the way at the group and subgrouping levels of however you want to represent your hierarchy. You can represent individuals. We have customers who don't represent any researcher profiles and only want to look at groupings, or you can divide it in ways, looking at a journal, volume, issue, article as well. So since that flew by pretty quickly, I wanted to take a second and look at an actual article page. So this is a journal article page, and you can see the counts per place where we've harvested them from. And there's also a visualization here on the left called the Plum print that shows each of the 5 main categories and how much impact each of them has had. And I'll talk more about the Plum print in a little bit. The point I wanted to make here, though, is if you look at the usage box, you can see there's usage metrics we're getting from PubMed Central, from PLOS, where it's been published, as well as from EBSCO. So what the infrastructure behind PlumX does is we don't just want to represent the metrics from the published version of the article. We want a comprehensive view and being able to link together all of the different sources and places where this article might appear online and pool that data together into one. So there's identity resolution of how we connect, the DOI to the PubMed ID to all of the different URLs that it's aliased under and published under so that we can get that full view. So if you look down here at the tweets that we're capturing here, you can see that we're capturing tweets from three different places, from PubMed, from someone actually sharing the dx.doi link on Twitter, and also people sharing the URL to where the article was shared. And this is kind of a very important piece to get a comprehensive view. This particular article was not deposited in any of our customers' repositories, but if it was, we would also have usage metrics from their institutional repository right alongside all of the other usage metrics. I think I have some examples later on that shows that, which I think is pretty cool. So this Plum print is something that can be embedded in other sites. So when it's embedded, you just see the little visualization, and when you hover over it, you can get more data about all the 5 categories and where they've been interacted with. So here's, just to give a flavor of that, here's a listing for a particular researcher of 6 of his articles, and you can kind of see when you're looking at them in a group, certain things have more, other things have less. It's something organic. It makes people want to interact and see what's behind that. To integrate that in a site, it's basically if you're hosting your own site or your own, say, institutional repository, it's just 2 lines of code that you can add. If you're using other things, say like bpress, it's just turning on a button and there's already a plugin that exists. So it's easy to integrate in. And then what happens is once you've inserted those 2 lines of code, you will then get these metrics that will then update automatically. So whenever we have new counts and someone views a page on the site where it's embedded, the visualization will change as well as the actual metrics themselves. In addition to the Plum print at the article or artifact level, we also allow widgets to be embedded at the group level, so any department could have their own departmental widget, which would show the researchers in their department with a way to navigate to them, and the top 5 most recent artifacts, along with the Plum prints to show you what's happening there, and when you click through, you can get to the full metrics. Similarly, a researcher by researcher can have their own Plum, their own widget, and each one, I should mention, each one of these sections is very easily configurable to turn on and off. So we've seen people use a per researcher widget that only has, for example, their recent artifacts, none of the other summary information, if they're embedding it on a page where it doesn't make sense. Like their own home page, they don't need their own description and name and all of that. Here is an example of University of Pittsburgh's institutional repository and how they have on each article page embedded a widget that shows, in addition to all of the other metrics, it also shows their own download stats right next to it. We think this is a great carrot to give to researchers to get them to contribute to repositories like this, because they're getting something in return. It's not just a, it's not just a stick saying, you need to do this as a part of getting, you're not going to graduate unless you put this here. Instead, it's giving them metrics in a way to see the impact and usage beyond just the 14 download counts that they would normally have. Here is an example of the University of Rhode Island's Digital Commons site. And what they do is they embed, in this case, both the Altmetric widget as well as the Plum print widget. And the Altmetric widget works off of primarily tweets. So this article has not ever been tweeted, and so it has a score of a 0, versus the Plum print where you can see all 5 categories of metrics. There's something to interact with here. We have usage, we have captures, social media and citations, Facebook shares these are, but no tweets. So this isn't a zero. There's a story here, and we want to be able to pull that out and be able to visualize what that story is. The other point is, and before I go on, Marianne, I think I saw a note from you that questions are coming in. Should we pause here and answer a few, or should I keep going?
Hi, Andrea. Well, we have 2 questions. One was about how, let me see it. If you would compare between arts and humanities, social, and sciences and health, how would PlumX work? So I think that's sort of an interesting thing, because I know we've worked hard with PlumX to be able to also add value for the arts and humanity and social sciences researchers.
Great, and actually, you know what I'm just about to talk about is a great segue. So good plant, whoever that was. You knew what I was going to say. So one of the things in the arts and humanities is it's more than just articles. So we've, from the beginning, both with the work that we did with Pitt, and the Smithsonian was also one of our early customers, looking at the core STEM, STEM output and how do we do a good job there, but also the humanities. So beyond just journal articles, these are the other sorts of artifacts that we measure. And being able to tell that complete story is important to us. So if we look at books, especially in the humanities, they do count. And we've had a partnership early on with OCLC to get their WorldCat library holdings in product. And we've done workshops with humanities scholars, and one of the fun parts of that is when they build their own researcher profile, they look and they're like, hey, look, my book's been held in 421 libraries. Where are you at? And they're almost giddy with having metrics to talk about that, and it's something that we're continuing to add to. So Amazon book reviews are there. We are just about getting ready to launch Goodreads. It might even be launching while we're talking right now. So we're right on the cusp of launching that to have those sorts of metrics. Wikipedia is another source of metrics for us. So when someone reviews a book or just links to the book by an ISBN on Wikipedia, we can pull that back. And then with EBSCO, and I'll talk in more detail, EBSCO is providing data about all of their ebook usage to us. So we get the number of times the abstract's been viewed, the number of times it's been clicked with, interacted with, et cetera. So we're giving a kind of across-the-board view of at least the books that EBSCO tracks, those metrics as well. So the metrics that I'm talking about here are listed below. And this is exciting because it's across the entire, this is all usage on any of those platforms, then brought down to an article by article basis. So, or an artifact by artifact. And one of the questions I saw zoom by here was, what constitutes an artifact? And all of these things are what I mean by an artifact. Any one of these is, so a researcher blogs and they put a blog post, they blog about their research, and they want to count that. They want to count the interaction of their blog as a piece of their research output, they can. If they've, given a presentation, if they've created videos, if they're sharing data sets, all of these additional ways of talking about their output, or talking about their research rather, that's all that we try to gather data about. So with the EBSCO usage metrics, this launched maybe a month ago, if that, And within an hour of launching, one of our customers came back with this great quote, which is, you know, bringing in EBSCO usage stats is an impressive development. The benefits of being able to see EBSCO hits by author is really going to bring tremendous amounts of relevant scholarly data to Plum. That is a big, and I mean big, development. I don't think anyone has ever done that before, to be honest. And this was, you know, as product developers, you launch something, you get this kind of great feedback. It's really invigorating, and it's really saying, yes, we do have all of this data exhaust, again, that we're able to bring to bear in a cross-publisher way. We don't need to go publisher by publisher by publisher to get article-level usage data. We'd love it. We'd love it if every publisher gave us all the usage data about their articles. That's not going to happen quickly. So what this enables us to do is get a great proxy of usage across, you know, across many, many, many people interacting with it, which is wonderful. So bringing it to how does this help me? So we really talk about things in 3 different areas, and we have a wide, we have a very wide audience here on the webinar today. So I'll try to hit the three places where people are coming from. So first, if you're performing research or an institution performing research, what these sorts of metrics give you is really a great way to see and to see the impact of the work that you're doing and your researchers are doing, showcase its impact, and help those researchers better compete for grant dollars, for knowing where to publish, for knowing how to be the most effective in what they're doing. If you're a funder of research, you know, you're a grant maker, one of the things that PlumX enables is being able to see those stories behind what you've funded, to be able to talk about the return on investment, to be able to show the great work that's happening. And then finally, if you're publishing research, and in this case, I would also include institutional repositories and publishing. What we're doing is through the Plum print and some of those dashboards, really giving insight into what impact each article has had and giving tools to the authors so you can better recruit and retain the authors who are publishing or contributing to your platform. Here's a quote from Bill Gates in his 2013 annual letter talking about the environment of how much we need better measurement tools to deal with how funding is being given out. So this is from the Gates Foundation perspective, not the Microsoft perspective, of course. So it's saying, you know, given how tight budgets are around the world, governments are rightfully demanding effectiveness in the programs they pay for, and saying to address this, we need better measurement tools. So this next slide is from data from the NIH, which I don't think is a surprise for anyone here, but it's talking about this increased competition for research dollars. So looking at last year's data again, nearly 50,000 applicants, and only 17% of them got a grant. So that means less than 1 in 5 people get funding who apply, which, said another way, is 4 in 5 people do not get funded. So looking at who, right? So if you want to be in that, you know, that 17%, how do you get there? And this data comes from NSF, just talking about how do they look at proposals that come in. So if you look at the bell curve of proposals, you know, the blue bar, there's certain ones that are outstanding, and on the other end of the spectrum, the poor, fair, good. So the outstanding ones almost always get funded, and the good, fair, and poor almost never get funded. But there's this gray zone, which is if you're in that gray zone, somewhere between excellent and very good, how do you get on the other side of that red line? how do you get to where you're funded? And we believe, and getting to that timely impact, that, this is what I've done lately. I'm going for a follow-on grant. This is what I've done in the past 2 years. That data helps tell the story of what you've done much better than the journal impact factor of where you've published and just a raw score or a raw publication list. So these more complete, comprehensive metrics can help tell that story. As we've progressed, especially over, I'd say, the past 12 months, one of the things that's been a really remarkable change from my perspective is we originally were talking just to librarians, because that's both my background and Mike's background and our, who we knew when we were this small little bootstrapping startup. But as we've really gotten the message and the word out about what PlumX does and what kind of the tool can do and our approach to Altmetrics and how it all fits together, what we've seen is the people who are supporting the researchers and then the Office of Research of pooling and grant dollars are collaborating much more closely. And it's really a neat opportunity as we've now had, multiple customers where these two groups are coming together and both at the table. It's really an opportunity to make this happen. I mentioned on the beginning slide that funders are also using PlumX. So Autism Speaks has announced, is the first to announce that they're using Plum Analytics, and what this does is per researcher, or per grant rather, in this case not per researcher. So per grant, they're able to classify the grant in these kind of category hierarchies. So by geography, by institution that the grantee, the primary applicant is affiliated, by their own portfolio hierarchy, and by the proposal type. So those dashboards I showed earlier, they have dashboards across everything they fund, and then by this hierarchy, at any one of these levels. So if they wanted to just see the work that they funded in UC Davis, they could see that, for example, or just by a particular type of proposal. So this is, their Trailblazer Awards, which are their highest awards that they want to be able to go and just look at every piece of output associated with those types of awards and be able to compare and contrast how different things are doing. So I'm going to hop out of PowerPoint, save you guys for a minute, and show you a little bit of how that works, which might give some insight into how we get started and build these tools for all different uses, build the dashboards for different uses. So with Autism Speaks, they started with a list of their active grants and just simple data like here's a grant ID, here's the applicant, here's where they're associated with, the geography that it's in, the type of proposal, the year, the amount that they've given. This is all public data, so I'm not showing you guys anything. I know when I whip out Excel, people think I might be showing private stuff, but no, this is all very, very public data. And this is what they have and what pretty much every funder has at their disposal. What did we fund, how much, and who did we give it to? And you'll notice that those, the columns here are very much related to the hierarchy that we were able to build as a dashboard. So if I go to Autism Speaks, the first thing you'll notice is there's a sign-in page. So our dashboards can be either public or private. Right now, the Autism Speaks dashboard is private while they're adding all of their active grants to it. And once they've loaded all of their active grants in, then their plan is to remove the username password. So if I sign in here so that it's publicly available. So these same sorts of, the same hierarchy that I mentioned, you can drill in. And this is the researcher that we were looking at in the PowerPoint slide. And so it's the same kind of dashboard. Again, the way you can navigate through, you can click through to see any of the article level metrics for the work that he's funded. You can do things such as, this is a sunburst view that shows of everything Paul Ashwood has produced. What the things that have had the most interaction get the widest piece of the pie. The things that have had lesser get a smaller piece of the pie. So it's a really great, quick and dirty visualization. If they're saying, okay, let me see what Paul's been up to. Oh, this article here is getting a lot of interaction with, or this one here, this might be a good place to start to drill into this and be able to see what's really going on behind that. To build the particular profiles, what they've chosen to do, oops, I went back too far, is, let me go back to Paul here. They did not have a system in place that tracked research output for each of the grants. So they went in and to have web-based tools to be able to go and add every DOI that they want to claim. If this is a researcher whose output is represented in ORCID or in bPress, you can just go and put in their ORCID ID or their author URL if there's, in selected works, and this will automatically get pulled in. If you want to import a list of research from Web of Science or Scopus, you just export the file and then upload into the system. In general, when we're building free trials, we'll use one of these mechanisms to build out interactively what PlumX would look like and what these reports and dashboards would look like for your researchers. And then as we move into implementation, we work with each customer to say, okay, where do you have data? And we've done all sorts of ways to bulk load data from, from Vivo, if they have a Vivo instance, or from, if they use bPress selected works, pull all of that data in, or if they have a homegrown system to interact and interface with that. And depending on the size of the institution, some people have that, other people don't, and they're really starting from the beginning. And if they're starting from the beginning, we have several customers who are just building this out using our tools. So DOI, PubMed IDs for books, being able to input ISBNs or OCLC numbers, preprint services if they're using them to put in either their user profile or particular IDs. SlideShare, YouTube, Vimeo, being able to really go in at whatever level people are storing stuff on these different places and automate the harvesting. So we have researchers who give lots and lots of talks, put them on SlideShare all of the time. And even though we bulk load their research output from the traditional way that the university is tracking it, we also add their SlideShare ID here so that every new presentation they give, we can pull the data in automatically. Patents, clinical trials, source codes, data sets, and if all else fails, like it did for Paul Ashwood, none of these nice clean identifiers are there, you can add in a URL. So some of the research output they were tracking or that they wanted to have there was, a blog post that happened on Autism Speaks, et cetera. So we can just add a URL and our site will pick up and track, or PlumX will pick up and track from there. So I want to leave a little bit of time for Q&A, so let me cruise through the last of this. Oops. If I could click. There we go. So one of the questions that I can't skip because I know it'll be in Q&A if I do is Altmetrics. I hear they can be gamed. How do you present, so how do you present what you do and Altmetrics with minimal bias? So the biggest thing that we do is not give a single count. So journals, we talked about the impact factor. For people, for researchers, H-index, there's a fair number of people who just say, I am not, I am not just my H-index. And then kind of on the sillier front, I've put my clout and my cred score here. So I'm a 48 on clout and a 618 on cred. And what does that tell you about how impactful or influential I am? It's not anything, I would say, or very little. And articles themselves giving a score we think is very dangerous, which is why we've gone with a way to visualize the impact but not putting a single number, because it's impossible to compare, that book in the humanities to an economist working paper, to a chemistry paper, to a oncologist study, and give them all a number that makes sense to compare them with. So what we do instead is allow data to be compared in many different ways so that we can compare, look at how you want to look at the data, what's important to you, and be able to compare like with like. Sort the data, analyze it, compare it to one another. We also make the data as transparent as possible. So whenever we can, we expose the links to the original source of where we got the data from. So you can see these counts are blue and can be clicked into. Some cases we can. So Facebook here is a good example of where we can't, because we can't, the Facebook API, their interface, doesn't allow us to know who liked them because it's private data. They only expose to us that 2 people liked this paper. So when we can, we expose it, and when we can't, we just give the number. So I talked a little bit already about getting started of how do you build profiles. So we try to leverage in every place what already exists. And we do anything possible to eliminate the rekeying of data, because we know if we come in with this, doesn't matter how bright and shiny the new tool is, if it requires everything, the researchers especially, to put their data in yet another place, most likely our customers' initiatives will fail. So we're really trying to work with whatever systems are in place and then connect with things that augment that and put one single path forward. And I walked through in the, or flew through, I won't even say I walked through, all of the different types of IDs that we support. And yes, we do support going to URLs. We're a web native product, so as much as we'd love everything that we track to have a DOI, that's not reality. And we do need to be able to get as much as we can when we start with just a URL. So Altmetrics in general give a new way to tell the story about impact. So one of the things that we're doing up next is better reporting off of this data. So we've recently improved how we filter data so that we can select the type of metric you're interested in, select the type of artifact, and also restrict it by year. So one of our top requested features was a year-by-year report on each dashboard, so you can now do that. And then our next step along this path is actually being able, right now you can always export all data in its raw form to Excel. We're improving that functionality, so now when you export it, you'll still get the raw data, which is very similar to what it looks like now, but you'll also get Excel charts pre-generated for you so that you have a place to easily be able to customize it if you want, but even if you don't, give a place to start with the data and different ways of interacting with it. And these are just some of our sample reports, the artifact types by publication year, metrics and publication totals by publication year, which actually this data shows a really nice trend that's reality. So citations here are in red, and you can kind of see the most current years, the number of citation counts that are measured are going down, right, because they lag. And at the same time, the social media counts of what we can measure is going up. So it really does, this is data, not from a real university, but it's a sample of University of Pittsburgh's data, and you can see those trends. And it goes on and on. I won't go through all the different types of reports we have, but being able to give our users, our customers, a place to start. Because that's another prime piece of feedback we got was the data's great, now what can I get from it? And we firmly believe it isn't just ranking things, but being able to compare this like with like in ways that can easily allow people to move forward. So in general, we're looking at turning all of this big data we're collecting into information for researchers to use so that they can monitor, through the social media accounts, monitor how well their promotional efforts are working. We've seen when researchers first get their profiles and they're looking at who's interacting with it, who's interacting with their work. It's kind of like Googling your own name on steroids, right? You're getting to click through and see who the people are that are interacting with it. They're often discovering other researchers who are interacting with their work. They're able to see how their co-authors are performing relative to one another, and answering these like core questions like where should I publish next, and then finally being able to take all that data together to be able to better compete. So the way I'm going to open it up for questions here in our last 10 minutes or so, but before I do, if you want more information, there's some data on our plumanalytics.com website. The University of Pittsburgh site is totally open, so you can walk through that on your own. You can find it just by going to plu.mx. And if you're interested in getting a free trial with your own data in it, because it's one thing to look at other people's data, it's another to look at your own use case and your own researchers and how could their work be represented and what can you learn from it. Send an email here to plumx@ebsco.com, and someone will absolutely get back to you on that. So Marianne.
So, yeah, are you ready for a few questions?
Absolutely.
All right. One came in. We have some questions about the metrics themselves, one of which is, how do you disambiguate artifacts to ensure you are counting activities related to the same item?
Yeah, so we have a set of algorithms / heuristics, and sometimes we're very cautious to not what we call overmerge, where we are merging things that don't really belong together into one. So if we have data where both things have the same DOI from two different sources, well, of course, we would merge them. We're able to do kind of crosswalks between different identifiers. So being able to look up for a particular PubMed ID, here's the DOI that's associated with it. And we can then do things like resolve the DOI and see where that publisher's site is. And then we know we have rules of, oh, it's this site. Here's the 7 different ways they make URLs on that particular journal site so that we can capture all that social media activity. So often what we'll see for a particular artifact, for one journal article, we may have 27 different places that we're pulling data together for it. And we try to be very conservative of what we do, and then behind we have internal tools that allow us to say, okay, you know what, we're looking at this particular profiles, or a customer service request came in that said there's duplicates on the result list. Let's first see if we can improve our algorithms to make it automatically dedupe these or merge them, and if not, then we can manually merge them together. So it's kind of a growing, evolving knowledge base of how scholarly data is, can be merged and disambiguated. I don't know if that answers it, but.
And along the same line, but about authors, we have a question about what metadata do you use to identify authors / works in IRs, and what is essential versus what is nice? Yeah,
the biggest thing is working per customer. If they know disambiguated authors, we'd love to start with that. So some some institutions are trying to roll out ORCID across the board. That'd be wonderful. Most are not yet there, or even if they've given everyone an ORCID ID, they don't yet have their, their outputs assigned to that ID. So what we've been able to do is, so say someone uses, I'll pick on bpress selected works again. We're assuming if they've gone through and implemented that those are good disambiguated authors, and we'll start from there to build their site. So we try to leverage what's there. We don't try to disambiguate the world's authors and start that way. Although for certain sites we have done it. So like, for example, the Smithsonian, when we started with them, I think they have about 800 affiliated researchers or 600. Not a huge number, but still more than a human would want to sort out. We ran through and automatically imported it and created profiles, and they knew we were able to tell which ones had name clashes, and then we manually sorted, maybe the 10 researchers who had the same name. And when you're doing institution by institution, you can take those approaches, whereas when you're trying to do all the world at once, those approaches are not scalable.
We have a couple questions about widgets. I'm just going to try to wrap it into one question. So it's kind of the two themes here are what is the code/logistics for setting up the widget, and if you have something like Digital Commons, would it be better to go with a widget, or would you recommend a dashboard such as like what Pittsburgh's using?
Yeah.
When we show.
Yeah. Our customers who have Digital Commons, what they do is they can just click a button and work with their implementation person and then click a button. So I don't know if it's in every install yet or not, and it will add the Plum print to your Digital Commons page, similar to what University of Rhode Island did. And then the dashboards kind of sit alongside of that. So for every profile that exists, we build a dashboard for that. And we also build a dashboard across the entire institutional repository so that you can see all of your, you can have the sorting, the exporting, the reporting features on that entire repository as a whole. Did I cover the first part of that, Marianne?
I think so.
Okay.
And while we're talking repositories, someone wanted to know what's in use at University of Pittsburgh.
They use ePrints, yeah. And I can remember it because it's named D-Scholarship, and they use ePrints, which I, for the longest time kept thinking it was D-Space, but it isn't. It's ePrints, just to make it nice and confusing on me.
And I'm going to read you this question about tweets. The item you showed, and I can't remember which one it was, but probably it's the first one. The item you showed with no tweets but other activity was a year 2008 item. Tweets are usually very early indicators. Do you expect this kind of time discontinuity to stabilize over time? And how long before you would be confident of a stable state for comparison?
Yeah.
I think what we're getting at is the early things don't have tweets, but the recent things do.
Yeah, there's still a very low number of scholarly articles that have been tweeted. I wish I had the stat on top of mind, and I don't want to misquote a number, but it's a low percentage of scholarly articles that have even received one tweet. So I don't think tweets alone are ever going to be the only metric we want to look at. And it's really looking across the board, because there will be services that we have not even dreamt of that will come on the scene 18 months from now and will be all the rage. And maybe some of the things that we see that are important now are going to start to fade. So it's important to kind of bucket things by time period and compare within that time period, because you're absolutely right that comparing a 2008 metrics to something in 2013 are totally not going to line up.
And let's take one more question. We're at the top of the hour. Do you weight different sources? Was a question we got.
In general, no. The only place where we weight sources is kind of on the back end, where we might do things like take the bibliographic metadata we get from Crossref above something that our web crawlers would find. So from a from a bibliographic, how are we building that metadata perspective, we weight sources. We also weight metric sources too. So if we can get a metric directly from its source, we will favor that metric over a metric that we get from an aggregator of metrics. And a good example of that is PLOS, which in their article level feed, they give us lots of metrics, and we take them all, but we also can get the metrics, so say a Facebook count. If PLOS tells us a Facebook count and Facebook tells us a Facebook count, we're going to favor Facebook's count over something someone else tells us. So we do it on that perspective, but once we build the data on the dashboards, what you see is what you get, and we're not weighting things one way or another. We give you an ability to select what you care to view, but we don't say, oh, tweet is worth 1/1000th of a citation or something like that. We don't do any of that sort of weighting.
All right. Well, thank you, Andrea, and thank you to all of our attendees for the engaging questions and your interest for the last hour.
Yes, absolutely. And definitely, if you're interested in hearing more, email us. That's probably, or talk to your, if you talk to your EBSCO rep, and they'll hook you up and get your questions answered as well. But thank you, everyone.